Hello chess enthusiasts, my name is Miha and welcome to my Chess Realm YouTube channel. So Airthings Masters online tournament has just begun. We have top grandmasters playing, among them Magnus Carlsen. Each player receives 15 minutes and 10 seconds increment per move. So we have rapid games. And let's go to the first round, a duel between Andrey Esipenko and Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. Let's see what happened. Andrey Esipenko had white pieces and he started with e4, e5. Knight to f3 and now d6, and we have Philidor defense, so we don't see that very often. This is a passive but a solid defense. So white plays d4, striking the center. He captures on d4, knight recaptures, knight to f6 and knight to c3. So far pretty much according to the theory. And maybe black should try with bishop to e7 and then castle, so the theory proposes, but black plays g6, preparing to fianchetto his dark square bishop, but also weakening this f6 square. So white immediately grabs the opportunity, bishop goes to g5, pinning this knight on f6. And now black plays bishop to g7 and now queen to d2. Now once black castles, then white gets to harass the black in with bishop to h6. Now, while the rook is still here on h8, black is trying to drive this bishop away, so h6 was played. Now white has to decide what to do with the bishop. White can either capture or maybe go back to e3, but in the game white plays bishop to h4, still keeping the pin on this knight on f6, but this is not so tragic. Black could indeed try with knight to e4. Of course, if knight recaptures, then queen captures the bishop and black is whole pawn up. If, however, bishop captures on d8, then knight captures queen on d2. Now, of course, if white captures a knight, then black captures bishop, and again, black is a whole pawn up and a bishop pair, and this is much better for black. So here, white would first have to recover the pawn. So after bishop to c7, the game would probably continue with bishop captures on d4, king captures on d2, and probably king to d7, attacking this knight. Knight can, of course, bishop can capture knight, rook recaptures, black has a bishop pair, white has better pawn structure, and the game is roughly equal. In the game, however, black doesn't go for it. Instead, black castles king side and white castles queen side. So we have opposite side castling when we are expecting a very sharp game. Maybe black should try with, I don't know, either rook to e8, developing the rook, or maybe bishop to d7 or knight to d7 instead. Black has decided to play knight to c6, a very, very bold and very dangerous move, because white is x-raying this queen on d8, so this can open a lot of tactics. So white grabs the opportunity, knight captures on c6, b-pawn recaptures, and now white plays e5, attacking this knight on f6. Of course, knight is still pinned, so white threatens with gaining the knight. Of course, if the pawn captures, then simply queen captures, rook captures, and white is winning. If, however, black would try with again with knight to e4, then again white would have to capture queen on d8, and after knight captures queen on d2, then white shouldn't capture immediately knight on d2, because after rook captures, again black has a bishop pair, and here is in a little better position. So here again white would have to grab some material. After bishop would capture pawn on c7, there isn't any good square for this knight to go, so knight can only capture bishop on f8, but then e-pawn captures on d6. Now both bishop and pawn are connected. This knight is going to be captured soon. White is 2 pawns up, and this d-pawn is about to advance, and white is winning here. But in the game, black plays g5, unpinning this knight on f6, and of course now e-pawn captures on f6. Of course, g-pawn cannot recapture, because again this f-pawn is still attacking the bishop on g7. So first black captures pawn on f6 with queen, and now white removes this bishop from h4, so bishop goes to g3, the only square, and now rook goes to b8. So black has sacrificed a whole piece in order to gain this open, semi-open b file. Of course, black is targeting this pawn on b2, So white wants to reinforce it somehow. Of course, white cannot play b3 because pawn on b2 has to protect knight on c3, who is double attack and defend it only once. So first white plays bishop to c4, preparing this bishop to b3, closing this file, and now black responds with bishop to e6. Of course, the idea is remove the bishop from c8, at some point double the rooks here around the b file, putting a lot of pressure here on the pawn on b2. So white plays bishop to b3, and now black plays c5, preparing this c4 pawn push, attacking the bishop on b3. Well, in this position, maybe the best option for white would be simply to capture bishop on e6. Of course, if black would recapture with queen, then white could try queen to d5, trying to exchange queens. If, however, black would capture with a pawn, then white simply pushes h4, attacking pawn on g5. If black would still want to double the rooks along the b file, let's say rook to b6, then h-pawn simply captures on g5, h-pawn recaptures, and after rook to h5, pawn is double attack. Black doesn't have time to double the rooks. After rook from the last rank goes to b8, queen simply captures, trying to force the exchange of queens. And of course, if queen captures, after rook captures, after then black would probably try with rook to b2. Yeah, that would be, let's say, a little unpleasant. Well, definitely black would try to occupy this c3 square with the bishop, because from there he would protect also d2 square, trying to deliver some kind of mate. But in this position, white would simply play bishop to e5. Now this bishop is pinned, so white would definitely try to grab it. And if d-pawn captures bishop on e5, simply rook to d7. Again, this bishop is pinned. White is going to capture this bishop, and with a knight up, this is winning for white. So this was definitely one of the options for white to win the game. Well, white does indeed try to challenge this pawn on g5, but white attacks it with f4. And now, of course, black plays c4, attacking bishop on b3, but before removing, white plays f-pawn captures on g5, attacking the queen. Now, of course, if queen captures and then queen captures, queens are traded, and black definitely loses a whole initiative. If, however, black would capture on g5 with h-pawn, then white would probably remove the bishop to a4, and then after rook to b4, preparing to doubling the rooks along the b file. Well, white would have to be careful, because if white would hesitate and make a random move, then simply after rook from the last rank goes to b8, his pawn is going to be captured, and this would be very dangerous. Of course, again, white cannot play b3, because this knight here on c3 is double attack. So here white would have to immediately play rook from h to f1, driving this queen away. But in the game, however, black sees this position differently and plays queen to f5. Now bishop on b3 is still under attack, but instead of removing it, white plays g-pawn captures on h6. Of course, pawn on h6 is protected, so bishop cannot capture it. You might think that, of course, black can regain a piece by capturing knight on c3. Well, in this case, queen simply captures, and of course, black cannot immediately capture bishop, because white is threatening with mate on g7. So after queen to g5, king goes, let's say, to b1. Now g7 square is protected. Now c-pawn captures on b3. After a-pawn recaptures, of course, queen captures on h6. So we have material is almost equal. White is pawn up with this black king is left in the open. White is simply winning. Let's say one of the possible continuations is rook from h goes to f1, preparing somehow to deliver the final blow. And after maybe, I don't know, queen to h7, rook goes to d3. After bishop to f5, attacking the rook. Well, here white simply sacrifices the exchange. After queen captures, have another bishop sacrifice on e6, clearing this g3 square. Well, if c-pawn recaptures, then we have rook to g3 check. And of course, if king goes to h7, the only move for king, then queen to g7 checkmate. Here the only option for black is to sacrifice the queen. After queen to g6, rook captures, f pawn recaptures, and now we have queen versus two rooks, but white has two additional pawns, and this is simply a winning position for white. So in the game, black plays bishop goes back to h8, and now white plays rook from h go to f1, attacking the queen, and black removes the queen to a5. Now white is much better here in this position. Now one of the continuations here is maybe if white would remove this attacked bishop on b3, let's say after bishop to a4, but maybe white was afraid of this rook to b2, because if black captures here on b2, after king recaptures, now queen captures on a4. Of course, knight here is pinned from the bishop, and white would have to be very careful, because if white would make a random move, then after queen to b4 check, this would be winning for black. If king goes to a1, then simply bishop captures, attacking both king and queen. And of course, if for example king goes to c1, then we have queen to a3 check, king can only go to b1, and then we have rook to b8, and it's going to be mate in a couple of moves. So here in this position, white would have to find this a3 pawn push, preventing this queen to b4 check, and then white would probably win. Still, this is a very tricky situation, so white has decided not to go for it. Instead, white plays h pawn goes to h7 check. Well, if king doesn't capture, if king goes to g7, then bishop can simply capture here on c4. If bishop recaptures, again queen to d4, again double attack on king and bishop, and white again gains back the material and is winning. So in the game, king captures pawn on h7, and now white plays rook to f4, preparing this rook to h4 with a deadly attack on the king. There isn't much to be done here. If black tries to defend with queen to g5, then let's say after rook to h4 check, king goes to g6. Now here white can easily trade the queens, because after king captures, then bishop captures here on c4. Bishop is protected, white is bishop up and is winning in this position. In the game, black has decided to lose sooner, so c pawn captures on b3, and now we have rook to h4 check. Now black has a few options. If king goes to g6, queen to h6, king to f5, and rook to f1 checkmate. If, however, king goes to g7, then we have queen to h6 check, king to g8, and queen to h8 checkmate. So in the game, black plays king to g8, and now of course white plays queen to h6, preparing to deliver mate here on h8. Of course, if bishop goes to g7, it's queen to h7 checkmate. So here black could only prevent the mate by queen to g5, deflecting the queen, but then white simply gains a decisive material advantage, and realizing this, in this position, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov resigned the game.